Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on, uh, what do we call it? Is it like walking through the journey of 399 percentiles, Rida? What would we say?
I would say giving these guys the blueprint to mimic those journeys and really set the right foundations as well. You know, give you the principles to build your study plan would be good.
Yeah, I think that's good. So, welcome, guys, and so my name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of eGMAT. Along with me, I have Rida. Rida is our senior most GMAT strategy expert. A lot of the success stories that you see on our YouTube channel, Rida is the mentor for those guys. She guides them to success, and just a little bit about Rida. Rida is also a future or Darden student. She just got into Darden. She has a 730 on the classic herself. And yeah, she'll be leaving us in a few months. So we're very sad about it. But then Rida brings with her, but what, 3.5 years of experience guiding students to success, right?
Three,
So,
three and a half, a couple of success stories down the line. So not too bad of an expert at this.
you've done an immense amount of work, and she's also trained on our strategy team. So in this webinar, what I'm excited about is we're going to walk through study plans of three different students. Each one of them has scored at least the 99 percentile on the GMAT. Each one of them has improved their scores by over 100 points. So these are not students who actually started at extremely high abilities. These are people who had weakness in at least one section, and then together, three of each one of them has had at least one perfect score. So either a Q90, a V90, or a DI90. And so you're going to really see you're going to see study plans in each and every section, regardless of the one that you're looking to improve in. Also, as we go through this, we're going to talk about some general principles. What you're going to really see is the commonalities across all three, and when it comes to getting to that 80th percentile first, and then as you go from that 80th to that 99th percentile, there are unique challenges that each one of them faced, and we're going to really talk about what were those challenges and how we fix those challenges, or what frameworks should we apply to fix those challenges. And throughout this time, we're going to show their accounts, we're going to show their stats, so you can really see their bad stats as well as their improved stats. So that you can really, the goal really is for you to be able to mimic the process for your own self. So, Rida, with that, let's get started. And why don't you walk us through, in general, the principles of learning and how we think about approaching a 99 or 100 percentile score overall. So, yeah.
Got it. So, hi everyone. It's lovely to have you here. Now, I'm sure all of you are aiming for the stars and you're looking for that perfect or near perfect GMAT score. And the thing about a perfect score is that it starts with three really simple principles, right? Principle number one, perhaps the most important in your first stage of prep, is to set the right starting ability, right? You have to know your strengths, you have to know your weaknesses, and have to know exactly how strong and how weak you are in each and every section, right? So you have to know exactly where you stand if you really want to be able to achieve that 100 plus point improvement that you're looking at. The second thing, and I know a lot of you must be.
Let's just talk about the right ability. So, when you are starting ability, so would you kind of, when you take that initial mock test to get that ability, would you we use a certain framework to divide it into, I'm good in this, I'm not great in this, so just that recognition itself?
So I would say if you are above the 60th percentile in any subsection, you can consider yourself good. You'd probably know a fair amount of the concepts. If not, I would say 85% of the concepts. Where you'd struggle with is likely with your harder questions and application of process. If you're from that 0th to about 55th, 60th percentile, that's where I think we need to think about starting from the scratch, building your concepts, building your ability, right? We have to start from ground zero. And if you're above the 85th percentile, then you know your concepts, you can tackle probably the hardest of questions, but it's then about improving your test taking ability, making those final adjustments to your process application to really go from an 85th to a 95th plus kind of an ability.
And then when you talk about these starting abilities, are you looking at just the section level, so quant, verbal, DI, or are you looking at subsection level where, CR and RC, arithmetic, algebra, and then on the DI side, you have data sufficiency and the other subsections out there? What are you
So when
looking
you're
at when you're
Mhm. So when you're setting a study plan, it is so important to be as granular as possible. It can be very tempting to think you're just starting out at a 555 and you want to get to a 755, but that is not enough. I, for all of my students, dive right down to their CR and their RC abilities, their arithmetic, their algebra, and across DI. If you do not dive into those minutia, if you do not dive into those subsections, and if you don't set clear not just starting but also target scores for CR, for RC, then you will not be able to track your improvement and you will hit a ceiling in your prep. You'll hit a plateau and you'll struggle to move beyond that because you're not looking and you didn't start looking deep enough. So it's important that you set up the study plan with CR, with RC, with all your subsections in mind, not just starting, but target abilities even for the same.
So that's really critical as a first step. So we have the first principle, get the starting point, get those starting abilities at a subsection level. Let's move to principle number 2.
Right. Now, I know a lot of guys might read this out here and think, no, that's absolutely wrong. Practice is what makes things perfect. And I get that. But one of the worst things that you can do in the GMAT is dive straight into practice as soon as you start preparing, right? Especially if your ability is, I would say, below the 85th percentile. You cannot dive into practicing just 30 odd questions a day and hope to improve to that 90th percentile. That's because you're essentially going to just, I would say, reaffirm your ability through practice. You've not made any steps forward in terms of actually learning or growing your ability. And you're trying to, I would say, do the same thing and expect a different outcome, which is just not how things work, especially not in the GMAT.
And one of the other things I think that's really important in the context of GMAT preparation is managing your energy is really important. And when we don't see improvement, we have that tendency to give up. And which is where taking the right steps, making sure that you are improving continuously, that's really critical. If you don't do that, then that point will come and you'd say, oh, I'm done with this subsection. I'm going to try and do something else. And trust me, if you don't improve each and every subsection to the required ability levels, you're not going to hit that high score. And Rida will tell you from a personal experience, if you don't hit that high score, you're not going to get a scholarship, not just the admission, but the scholarship as well. So that's really
Oh,
important. And yeah.
no, absolutely. And I think when it comes to managing your energy, it's not just about, oh, I'm not doing well and I'm going to give up. It's also about, okay, I'm not doing well. I'll just, put my head down, nose to the ground, and just do repetitive tasks over and over again to try and practice. I think the reason why we're having this session at all today, Rajat, is so that people can have a very structured, guided way to approach their prep. And even when we talk about improvements from the 80th level, from the 80th plus, from when you're faltering and not able to even hit that basic threshold, it's about being systematic and being very intentional in every step that you take. And diving into practice is just not going to fulfill that objective at all.
Okay, so with that, let's kind of show how and when we dive into practice, and then through principle 3, let's show that through application itself.
Absolutely. Let's. So I think we can also really understand that, okay, these are the three core principles that we're going to use to create the study plan for your 100 percentile 100 point plus improvement, right? And in that journey to 100 plus points, I think it's most helpful to really break it down into a phase wise approach, right? Don't think about this as, okay, I'm going to go from the 55th to the 99th percentile all in one jump. If you can, that's great. But I think it's a lot easier and a lot more manageable if we break it down into about two sections, right? Where you're going from whatever starting ability you are to the 80th percentile, and then you go from the 80th to the 95th percentile. And each of those phases has different goals, different objectives, and the approach that we have and the efforts that it takes also really differs, right? So when you think of phases 1 and 2, phase 1 is all about getting your concepts right, getting your foundations right, understanding the process that's going to get you to success, and repeating that process on the right set of questions so that you can achieve the right kind of accuracies on medium and hard questions, right? Whereas phase 2 is really about understanding exactly how you can go from good to great, the small missteps in your process that are holding you back from that overall objective, and really starting to see the test in a systemic way where you're really
I think we lost Frida briefly, but phase two is essentially a debugging phase in many ways, and where you're kind of fixing the gaps that you have left over here. So let's kind of walk through this. We'll start with Sandipan, right? So let's look at his profile, his case study. Where did he start from, and how did he get to that 755? So you were his mentor. So why don't you
yes.
walk us through his starting point and then move forward?
Got it. So Sandipan did start out with us at eGMAT at a 625. He does have a background in engineering. He was very quant strong. And specifically, actually, his starting score was he was starting with a Q84, a D79, and a V80. So it was really clear that the most we were, the space for the largest improvement was that DI section where he was starting out at that D79. So looking at his background in strong quant background, we knew that if he wanted to improve at that time to a 7015 plus, the best way to really do it would be to maximize his quant, where he was an absolute killer, and to make that improvement in DI happen, where we had so much room left at the table to improve. And of course, improve his verbal as well along the way. But I think going into it, analyzing his strengths and weaknesses, DI and Quant is really where we saw the most opportunity for improvement
Got
to
it.
that
So then
755.
let's talk about stage one. So stage one, clearly for DI, he went into stage one. He did that, and if possible, can we log into his account? Can we see his account?
Yes, absolutely. So I have his account logged in right here. Just give me a second to share my screen, right?
Perfect.
But yeah, one thing that I think Sandipan knew from the get-go was that if he wanted to improve, then he really needed to get those foundations and those processes right for the entire DI section. And I think one of the best examples of where he's really done that is his MSR course, right? MSR, I've often found, is a question type that students really struggle with. But can you guys see my screen? I hope you can.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, we can. Yes.
Right.
And guys,
So just
continue to
looking,
ask questions um, as you were. Yeah, carry on, Rida.
yes. So MSR is often, I find, the question type that a lot of students struggle with just because of the volume of data, the number of sub questions in each questions, and just making the best use of your time. And that is actually, despite being such a challenge, the section in which Sandipan did the best on the course. He has just blown it out of the water. We can see that he has consistent A grades. And what that really means for people who aren't in the eGMAT ecosystem is that he's done better than the median of scorers on the eGMAT platform. He's really internalized the concepts, he's internalized the process, he's really understood how to tackle an MSR question in the most systematic and logical manner to get to that answer with the right accuracy in the right amount of time.
Let's kind of go and expand one of these modules. So expand learning level 1. And
Yeah.
I think that is really critical for you guys to see. So when you expand learning level 1, what you're going to really see are various activities. You see case study application 1, and you see grade A. So on the eGMAT platform, every activity is has a quality assessment built into it. Where if you get a grade A on a certain activity, it means you're in the top 15 percentile of students who've attempted that activity. Case study application 1, about 7,000 students have attempted this activity over here. So the data that you get is very representative. Similarly, you can really see case study practice 1 is something where he got a really bad grade. He got a grade C over here in that case. And again, clearly he took that to heart. He revised that right away. And that's kind of where you see the diligence of someone who truly wants to excel. You see 2 attempts on this activity. And you see that level of diligence that's built into his DNA, where he truly wants to excel on data insights, which is why the moment he saw a C grade over here, he said, I've got to go revise this. I've got to make sure that these mistakes don't carry on. And which is where you see case study application 3 a B grade, case study application 4 and a set of A grades as well here. And so that's where at an overall learning level, he got an A minus, I think. What was it? LL1. It's A
A
or A
minus.
minus. A
A
minus
minus.
means he's among the top 30% of all students in the eGMAT ecosystem, which if you are amongst the top 50%, you are primed for a high ability in your cementing phase. So that is what I call as being extremely deliberate when you're learning. A lot of us worry about giving our best only when we are in the mock phase or towards the fag end. Usually that does not help as much. You can improve slightly over there, but if you give your best during the learning phase, what you find is often the practice phase is much shorter. You don't have to practice as many questions to get to that high ability. Number one. Number two, once you get to that high ability, you stay there, and you don't reach a plateau at 90th or 85th. You actually hit that 99th percentile ability. So Sandipan was really good during the learning phase, and then let's kind of look at his stats there, Rida.
Yes. And I think one other thing here is that, after he hit that C in this practice quiz, every other practice quiz in this learning level, he's hit a straight A. So I think when you say he took it to heart, he really did, because he never allowed himself to falter even once after that on any practice quiz that he took.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
So these you should be able to see now are his cementing scores.
Yeah. So this is medium cementing. I think it's still rendering over here, and then it's hard cementing. So if you go to L20 hard, I think that's going to be a lot better.
Yeah, you should be able to see. I think it might be my internet that's a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
But you should be able to see the progression screen now.
So if you can read it out, does it say 90% for
Yes,
hard
and
question?
I zoom in. Yes. So this is Sandipan's progression across his hard accuracy across his time at eGMAT, since he's been practicing on the Scholaranium platform, right? And what we can really see from these most recent attempts is that because he did that stage 1 of learning those concepts so well, he has not dipped below a 90% accuracy on hard multi-source reasoning questions since he started practicing here, right? He went from 90 to 95 to a stable 90, right? And why that's so impressive is because the threshold to pass is only 55. So he's clearly blown that out of the water. And a 90th percentile ability indicates the readiness for a 99th plus kind of a score as well. Right, Rajat?
Yeah, say 90% accuracy in hard questions is almost perfect. 9 out of 10 times you are going to get, just in the context of MSR, you're going to score higher than 97th, 98th percentile ability over there. And this consistency chart is something that matters tremendously. So that's the first piece over here. So when you think about it, applying this principle here, identifying where you need to work. So that's one piece, which was MSR. Number two was putting in the work in stage one and getting good grades, tracking your improvement there. That's number two. And then number three, continuing with that. So building that foundation is important, but also making sure that you actually do cementing properly and you hit the hard accuracy metrics that you need to get to that 99 percentile ability or 100 percentile ability in the context of that subsection, that section. That's absolutely important, because only then do you translate those things into your actual mock scores. Now, Rida, let's kind of move on to something else. Now, I understand that Sandipan actually underperformed. I mean, this guy was primed for a 775, 785 score, but on the verbal
Oh,
section, he kind of underperformed over there. Um, but verbal wasn't as easy for him too. I mean, in CR, there was a time when he was stuck at a 55th percentile. We kind of, on the LM side, we kind of helped him jump. So how did we kind of address what were the issues that he was facing, where he had a dip to a 60% accuracy in CR, and then we pushed it back to that 75% accuracy in hard questions. That's more or less 91st, 92nd percentile ability in CR. So what did we
right.
do here?
So like you said, Sandipan right off the bat on CR was doing really, really well. Once he had learned the right concepts, once he had internalized that pre-thinking process, he was doing really well and he was pretty much good to go. But I think after a certain point, when we started moving away from, uh, once we started practicing, especially on things like sectional mocks and so on and so forth, that accuracy took a little bit of a dip, right? Where he was struggling to apply the CR process alongside RC and in that larger timed environment. So at that point, what we really understood was that with CR, what we really needed, and with verbal as a whole, what we really needed to do is to achieve and to display that 99th percentile ability. We, and what you guys need to do as well, is build the ability to express and to utilize those processes seamlessly in the test environment. So he found that after these mock tests, he wasn't able to apply the pre-thinking approach. He wasn't able to apply his regular CR approach with that level of ease. So we actually had him go through a cementing session. We had him revise his error log, understand exactly the steps that he was missing. Then we did some, to reinforce those learnings, some concentrated practice on some answered questions. We did some concentrated practice on OG questions, and then came back and he proved that ability back, not just on CR quizzes, but even on his mocks, as you see on the eGMAT platform, he was hitting it out of the water, literally.
So essentially, he had the ability initially, then he couldn't express the same ability in mixed environments. So that reinforcement was really necessary, and that reinforcement, I can really see it's in just over the course of about 8 to 9 days that was done. And the moment that reinforcement was done, he was able to hit those numbers back again. And this is something that's going to happen with could happen with many of you, where you initially were very good, but then you come back to a section and you find that hey, I'm not as good in that subsection, especially if you're performing at extremely high ability levels. And that's where going back to it, putting in some dedicated effort over there in that subsection can definitely bring back that old performance, which is what we saw with Sandeepan over here. Okay, it's 9:24 right now, so 24 minutes.
No, I was just saying that as these guys build their own study plans, like you said, I always recommend to my students that the first 10 to 15 minutes of your study session before you dive into something new, revise something that you've already learned, bring back that knowledge to the forefront so that one, that gets your brain going, that engine's running and it's warm. And two, it just reinforces those things right at the beginning of your study session session, and it allows it to stay in your brain all that much longer. It's exactly the advice you'd get while learning a new language, and it's exactly the advice that you should apply here as well.
Okay, guys, if you see something similar happening in your overall during your preparation, or if you face a similar issue, or if you face a slightly different issue for which you may be looking for a solution, then definitely feel free to put that in the comments, in the question, and we'll be happy to address them. Okay, so let's kind of move from Sandipan to Sai Kiran. And for Sai Kiran, let's talk about what his journey was, what his starting point was, and because Sai Kiran, I think we also have some interesting things. He had two-step improvement. So he had an improvement to 655, and then he had a 655 with 725 in about 21 days here.
Yes, exactly. And I think the fact that it's a step-by-step improvement, it was literally improvement one was phase one improvement, improvement two was phase two improvement. So it is one of the best study plans and actions that we can take up as an example, really. So Sai Kiran started off, like we can see here, with that 615. And in that 615, he was actually starting off with a sorry, he was actually starting off with a V83, a Q85, and a D74. So he's improved already 5 points in verbal to a V88, gotten that perfect Q90, and improved 6 points in DI to a D74. So clearly he's hit it out of the ballpark. Now, that first stage of learning from 615 to 655 was all about laying the right foundations. And there is no real better example than this of how he did the algebra course, right? One thing that we realized is that while Sai Kiran does have a lot of the ability, he does have a lot of the concepts, that application on harder questions is where he struggled. And this might be the case for you guys as well. You might think, oh, I know how linear equations work. I know how quadratic equations work, but I can't get GMAT linear equations questions right. I can't get GMAT absolute values questions right. So that application of concept is really what was missing for Sai Kiran, and that's what he really kind of worked on as well.
So we did a diagnosis in algebra first, and then we kind of had an improvement plan for him.
Yes, so he went through the algebra course itself, and you can see that he's really worked, again, not even a single A minus, I think it's all straight A's, where he really focused on filling in any gaps in his concept knowledge and also working to actually build that ability to tackle the hardest of questions as well.
But I think this is something which is really profound, because he was someone who started at a very high quantability, and you know, he had a Q84, Q85 even before he started with us. But then that's also that mindset of someone who truly wants to perfect something that he really understood, that if there's one area that he needed to improve on was algebra, and this is where data helped a lot, where we convinced him to go through the course, because most people at a Q84, Q85 would not go through the course, because they say all I need to do is practice, practice, practice. But he kind of realized how important that Q90 was to his overall end score, and which is where he spent the time. And I think for him, because of the fact the course is space enabled, the first three learning levels I can really see he only had to do about half of it, and then only learning level 4 is where, and learning level 5 is where he had to go through the complete module. So it overall was probably a good 20-hour investment, no more than that. But those 5 points, I think it's one of the fastest 5 points you could get if you invest 20 hours and improve your quant, verbal, or DI any sectional score by 5 points. I would take it any day, just because that score improvement is just so much more profitable there.
Yeah. And he actually saved in total, I think, about 42 hours of prep on the quant side. So it's not anything small, you know, and because he created such a individual learning pathway through PACE, he only focused on where he needed to, right? And for someone going, like you said, from Q85 to Q90, you should not waste time revisiting things that you know, and you should be able to identify and focus only on the areas that truly require effort And there, you don't cut any corners. That, I think, is very, very vital.
So just as a context with regards to PACE, PACE is an eGMAT term. We call it our personalized adaptive course engine. It builds custom courses for everyone in Quant. And through those custom courses, it first identifies what you already know, and then it just de-highlights those parts. So you only focus on areas where you actually learn something new. And so that kind of reduces a 200-hour course to for some people as little as about 60 hours or so. Okay, so he did algebra, did really well. What were his cementing stats in algebra?
Oh, his cementing stats are, I think, I could cry with joy. They are absolutely wonderful. And actually, I'll share my screen so we can see his algebra metrics live, right? So just give me, unfortunately, today in Bangalore, or at least where I am in, things are just not working out in terms of my Wi-Fi. So just give me a second. But truly, some of the best hard accuracies that I have ever seen for algebra as a whole. So you should be able to see my screen now.
Hmm.
Right? So we can see that he hit his cementing stats right at the beginning, but by the time he was ready and prepping for that 725 attempt, he was at a consistent 95% hard accuracy on hard algebra questions. So that, again, some of the best stats possible.
Okay, yeah, that's very impressive. All right, so again, the second principle over here is don't have that ego that you're really good in a subsection, or good in a section, and so you don't have to go to the basics. If data tells you got to go to the basics, then you have to go to the basics. And if, honestly, you already know stuff, you'll cover just the required basics very, very quickly, and then come back a lot stronger. Okay, so let's talk about RC. Sai Kiran also had timing challenges in RC, correct?
Right. So when we say timing challenges, Sai Kiran kind of struggled to divide time across RC in the most optimal way. So he was spending a lot of time in follow-up questions. He wasn't as efficient as we wanted him to be in reading the passage. He was getting that accuracy, but it was at a cost. So I think this is really principle 3 in action for him.
Okay, refinement and very specific refinement. Do you have his LM plan by any chance? Can we just look at it to really say what does an LM plan look like, or Sandipan's LM plan?
Yes, I have both, and I can share my screen again, and we should be able to see much easier.
Yeah, and as you guys see the LM plan, what you're going to really see is the degree of specificity you've got to go through in building an LM plan over here. So I'm going to remove our video, Rida, and just to walk you guys through what this means. This ML means milestone 1, learn and improve CR, milestone 2. So if you expand each one of these over here, in milestone 1, yeah, or any of these milestones, yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
No, go ahead.
Each of these milestones has activities outlined. Each activity has the resources that need to be used, as well as the number of hours that need to be put in place. And that's extremely useful at stage 3 once you achieve this. And what you're really seeing is that, those larger milestones, ML4 to ML9, your goals to improve Quant to Q87. So Q90 was something that he really hit it out of the park. But we were truly aiming for a Q87 over here, and you can see there's an arithmetic plan, there's an algebra plan, there's a quant test readiness. Everything's thought through, and this is something that 80 to 90% of it is done in the planning phase. There's, of course, dynamic adaptation as we see problems arise. We adapt this to fix those problems there, but it's that level of planning coupled with the diligence and learning that you need to put in place if you want to truly get to 100 percentile score in any section or overall on the GMAT here. Okay. If you guys need this link to any of these plans or a sample plan, you can put in your email address or just say hi. We'll be happy to share one plan in over here. So you guys can have a template as to what it means to do this. All right. So for Sai Kiran, do you want to talk anything else about the timing piece for him? RC, how bad was his timing up front, and then how much did it improve as you fix? Yeah.
Yes. So I think initially when we talked about it, like I said, we'd hit that stage phase 1 goal where he was about at that 80th percentile, but he was taking, I would say, more than a minute, about a minute and a half for each of the follow-up questions in RC. He wasn't getting the 100% accuracy that we needed there as well. And overall, he was struggling to manage the quantity of information that existed in that RC. So we realized that we needed to kind of shift him to reading like a manager. I think that was really the key for him to go from that 80th, 99th percentile on the verbal side, where we really equipped him on how to focus on what's important in an RC, get that maximum information, and then we really also focused on getting his timing. So his timing at the end, I believe, was about a minute to a minute and 15 seconds at the most for each of his follow-up questions in RC. And we did all of this, I think, in just about 2 to 3 days. It was not a long, drawn-out plan. It was a very quick implementation that we succeeded at because his ability was brought to that 80th level on such solid ground.
Okay. And just to really add to this, reading like a manager means that you're spending more time on what we call as decision points in RC. You're actually spending 30-40% more time, but you're rushing through detail because you're not going to get questions on details, especially details which are very, very domain specific, because you're not supposed to be a domain expert in the context of GMAT RC. And if you want to just understand what this is, register for one of our RC webinars, or in fact, even the CR webinar this weekend, and where we talk about what is reading like a manager, what does it mean to really extract, I call it twice as much information from those portions, while not worrying as much about the parts where you have excessive technical details. Okay. All right. With that, let's go to our third student. We are at about 40 minutes. I think we have about another 8 to 9 minutes that I want to cover. So tell me about our last student. He has a 745. He has a V90, a perfect verbal score. So Rida.
Oh yeah, and this is Sayam. So Sayam actually improved not just from 120 points in total. He was someone who had studied, I think, diligently from the classical version, and he improved all the way up to a 745 on the GMAT. In fact, I believe he improved from a 675 to a 745 in under a month's time as well. So Shyam was not my student, but he was our long-term student. And for him, what really worked, and this is something he's espoused on LinkedIn, on YouTube, is that he focused on Kaizen, which is continuous improvement, where he didn't move to make the jump from the 20th to the 99th percentile right away. He focused on smaller manageable achievements day by day, and all of that is really what built up to that final V90 success on the GMAT. And when we really talk about his success, I think it's important to see what a solid foundation he had really built on the CR course, on the master comprehension course, where he knew that as a non-native speaker, if he wanted to tackle those hardest of RC, hardest of CR questions, he needed to be able to tackle the most basic unit of any question, which is a sentence. And he applied those reading strategies. He got invested in everything that he was reading, and he tried to get the maximum learning and value out of every single read possible.
So I think this is where we're seeing a repetitive theme here. So regardless of whether you're looking at perfecting in Quant the way Sandipan did, or perfecting in DI. So uh, and Quant where the way Sai Kiran did, or perfecting in verbal the way Sayam did. You've got to have that mindset, that attitude of perfection, and and that attitude of perfection gets you that focus when you're learning. If you have that focus during that learning phase, you actually reap really rich benefits when you are eventually in the second phase, which is where you're doing extremely focused practice. You're actually fixing your gaps. You're identifying gaps, and then you're fixing gaps. Now, do we have any other stats from Sam that we want to show?
I think one thing that we should definitely show is his last mock score. So this was one of the last mocks that he took on the eGMAT platform. He got a fantastic 725. And that score was almost so predictive of his final split on the exam itself. I believe he got a D86, the same as he did on D-Day. He got a V88 and a Q84. So very, very close to what he did on the exam day itself. And that was a result of all those minor improvements that he made day on day. So these stats were truly phenomenal for him, as well as I think just his attitude towards learning, his stats on verbal are 70s, 80s hard accuracies, as we can see. So really, he's predicted his success through continually just working on in prep.
Yeah, I think the word that you really use, predicting your success, is a very relevant term. Rather than hoping for success, it's really important that you monitor the right stats so that you can truly predict your success overall. And you're not always going to get where someone scores a 725 on our platform and also gets a 725 in practice. That's not going to happen. You will be off by about but up to 20 to 30 points, and that's very normal. But if you're consistently hitting those stats on our platform, on your actual practice, those hard and medium accuracy metrics, then you are very likely, and when I say very likely, more than 90% likely to hit those high scores on the actual test. And when I say scores, those subsectional, those sectionals, and then eventually the overall scores as well. So with that, I think that's all that we wanted to talk about. If you guys have any questions, we'll be happy to take questions. Otherwise, we'll have the recording, and I'm going to put in my email address. If you have questions, you can write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com as well. Okay. With that, if you don't see any question in chat, then I'd say happy learning, and yeah.
I think Rohan has a question, more of a logistical question. He asks us how many
Yeah.
RC passages we have available for practice on the eGMAT platform.
I would say, I mean, if you consider the passages in the course, the passages in Scholarinium, passages in mocks, you're probably looking at 130, 140. And I think, yeah, so about 130, 140 full-length passages at least is what I would say. Yeah. Rida, do you know of any better?
I would say you have a minimum of 120 out of the practice itself. Even in the course, you'll do a couple dozen of passages. So 130, 140, I'd go slightly above 140, in fact, is what passages is what you'd really face on the eGMAT platform.
I think very few people actually use the entire set of practice questions on the platform. It's just we have those questions because they they use it to diagnose a specific weakness and then fix that specific weakness. And because different people have different specific weaknesses, so we need that plethora. But most people are get to their target ability with about 75 to 80 passages. That's kind of where I'd say we have that 80th percentile mark where 80% of the people need 80 passages or fewer.
Oh yeah. And I think if you're smart, if you're constantly monitoring yourself, that is really all that you would need to attempt in order to get to the kind of score that you're looking for on the GMAT. In fact, I think for um, definitely for Sai Kiran, who got to that V88 kind of a score, if I remember correctly, he did, of course, the courses and the passages in the course, but he also did, I would say, only about 50 to 60 practice RC passages on Scholaranium, because that's how precise he was in his practice. Okay, Vibhor has a question.
Vibhor has a question, yes.
So Vibhor says he's been studying GMAT for quite some time. He's getting about a 655 in the GMAT club test, and he still feels that there's scope for improvement, especially in timing. What should be the plan of action moving forward? So I think first question, Vibhor, is what does that 655 really comprise of, right? Bring us back to that first principle. Where are you? What's your starting score? That way we can set target scores and really figure out exactly what we need to do to go from 655 to, I would say, a 705. Let's talk about it that way, right? So it would be lovely if you can give us more information, or we can talk in hypotheticals, right, Rajat?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things is, let's say your 655 is composed of a let's say a Q84. 655 is what, rather 247, right? Sum of scores.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say it's a Q84, V82, and in D81. Yeah, 257 is 247. That's what it would be. So then, if you need a 695 or a 705, you need to get about 8 more points from here. So you need 255 to get a 705, and so those 8 points we have to first decide. We'll most likely push that quant by about 3 points to about 87. Push that verbal by about 4 points there to 86, and DI by about a point. Or a couple of points or so. So that's one way that we'll look at. So that's one way to strategize these pieces over here. Now, you indicated that you're primarily timing limited, and so Vibhor is saying, oh, Q8, V86, DI85, Q79. Okay, so definitely.
Quant real estate left to monopolize that, I think.
Quant real estate. So our first step is going to be diagnosing where that quant, that Q79, what are the weaknesses there, and so I would say a lot of our time would be spent on improving that quant weakness.
Yeah. And in the background to that, maintaining your verbal NDI so that we don't have to, after we fixed your quant, have to rejig your memory for all of that, But definitely quant, if you're 9 now, we can get 8 points straight off the bat just from there. And every incremental point that you get on the quant side is just going to push you higher and higher in that 700 zone.
Yes. So yeah, so it's fairly it's the plan would be fairly standard. But I would first confirm these numbers here. I would not go off just a single mock, just because a DI85 and a Q79 are not as common. I haven't seen them happen. So either a DI85 is an inflation, or a Q79 is a deflation, or both here. So I would confirm those. Once we confirm those, we have valid starting abilities, then we will really decide on valid target abilities here. Okay. And again, we had a guy who actually improved in about we had someone who improved in about 15 days to a 695 here. So you can really see how I went about doing that too. So hopefully that helps, Vibhor. Now, Baran says, I want to ask, the average score at top schools is about 730. This is not the case. Yeah, Focus Edition, 730, 675, 685-ish. So that's kind of what you can expect the median score at Columbia, at Stanford. Those are and Booth. So Columbia, Stanford, and Booth are typically suckers for GMAT scores. So that's kind of what you can expect over there, that 685 mark.
So I'd say if you wanted to be competitive, aiming for a 690, 705 would put you ahead of that pack. But
yes, it would put you ahead of that. It'll actually get you some really nice scholarship as well. So that's something that I always want people to aim for. So we'd actually be releasing an ROI tool very soon, where you can really see if you have a scholarship, how much more can you save over the course of 5 years, and versus if you don't have a scholarship. If you have a 50%, how much more can you save? If you have a 100% scholarship, that amount increases tremendously, because most people who don't have a scholarship, they would end up paying about $2,500 to $3,000 a month from their from their salaries, which is a reasonable amount. It's not huge, but it's not small either, and that money goes into saving, and if that's being invested into stock market, you can really see the increase in wealth there. So scholarships, those the delta between that 675 and a 695 and a 705 and a 715, in translated into dollars, actual dollars, is a lot. Okay. All right, guys. No other questions? Then I'd like to thank you guys for joining me today. Again, you have our email addresses. So you have my email address here. You can write to me at rajat@e-u.com if you still have questions. Otherwise, thank you and have a wonderful evening.
thanks, everyone.